Good morning, everyone. Before we begin, I would request you to kindly fold your palms and please recite this prayer after me. Om Ajnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuhu Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. The meaning of this prayer is, I offer my respects to my teachers who have opened my eyes which were firmly shut tight due to ignorance with the torchlight of knowledge. I am ever grateful to them, so I offer them my respects. Before I begin this seminar, I would like to have a quiz. GK. How many of you remember who won the World Wimbledon Championship 2 years ago? Okay, fine, no issues. How many of you remember who was the 5th President of India? That's fine, not an issue. How many of you remember who was the movie actor that was given Filmfare Award a year ago for the best acting? Okay, fine, leave it. That's not the point of my discussion. I'm going to ask you one very important question. How many of you remember one good teacher you had in your school? Okay. Next question is even more important. How many of you remember one terrible teacher you had in your school? How many years now? 30 years later, 20 years later. You don't remember presidents of the world, no, and you don't remember Wimbledon champions. You don't remember even movie actors and actresses, but you do remember. Who? The teacher. That goes to show what grave and serious responsibility we carry in changing or transforming lives of people. People will forget everyone else, but they won't forget these two things. One good teacher they had in their school and one terrible teacher they had in their school. That they will never forget. So, today's session is intended for making us the best teacher we can be. What are the knowledge, skills? I think I'm fine with this sound. I don't need to change it. Earlier setting is all right. So, what are the knowledge, skills and values a teacher should have so that they can become effective in their service as a teacher? That's our topic for today. Now, before we begin, let's have a look at the role or the importance that God places upon teachers. Please repeat. Yad yad acharati sreshthas tatta devetaro janaha sayat pramanam kurute lokastad anuvartate. Translation: whatever action a great man performs, common men follow. Whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, the whole world pursues. So there are three natural leaders to every one of us, every child. First is the parents, second is the heads of state, and third is teachers. They are natural leaders. And if they don't know what exact knowledge, skills and values they should have as teachers, then leading the blind, all fall into ditch. So therefore it is very important that we learn how should we exercise our leadership as a teacher properly? We will be held accountable in the eyes of God, not only the eyes of society, in what we have done for our students. Often in modern times, we have teaching being seen as a profession in terms of just some kind of money making or some prestige building or some type of just hobby that people may have. Going beyond these reasons, the one singular reason why we should become a good teacher is because it is the most sacred service we can do to others. Education is painful, continual and difficult work to be done in kindness. Interesting, some painful work to be done in kindness. You experience some trouble for yourselves, but you are kind towards others while going through it. By watching, by warning, by praise, and above all, by example. That's education. How many of you know the root word educare in Latin? What is the meaning of education? Educare means to bring out what is within. We originally are God's parts and parcels, and we have inherent knowledge. And education is the process of uncovering that knowledge and bringing it forth back again for our practical use. So that is education. Who can become an educator now? After having learned a little about what is education, please repeat. Vacho vegam, manasa krodha vegam, jihva vegam, udaropastha vegam, etan vegan, yo vishaheta dhiraha, sarvamapi mam, prithivim sashishyat. A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, vacho vegam. Urge, you understand? Impulses in the body. They push us to do action. We will learn to tolerate them. So vacho vegam, urge to speak. Manasa vegam, urges of the mind. Mind keeps making whimsical demands. One should learn to tolerate. Krodha vegam, the demands of the anger. Then jihva vegam, the desire to taste palatable foods that drive us here and there. Jihva vegam. Udara upastha vegam, the urges of the belly and the genitals. Etan vegan yo vishaheta, one who can tolerate these 6 urges, he is fit to become a guru or a teacher. He is called dhiraha. Dhiraha means very sober person, and sarvamapi mam prithivim sashishyat. He is fit to make disciples all over the world. So quite a bit of a qualification in terms of becoming a teacher. One has to become self-controlled. Self-control is a prerequisite for social contribution. And that is why not only we learn, but we also impart this self-control to our students. That is how we make exemplary citizens. Now, the Vedic literatures are full of this exact paradigm, accurate paradigm being described for education. And there are some inherent differences between the way the Vedic education works and our modern education works. So we would like to highlight some differences and then try to figure out how could we bridge the gap. We have that printout that has come. Can you just check? So, first and foremost is that Vedic education, none of the teachers or facilities or even the education imparted is charged. It's free. It is always given as a gift. And the child is told that he should gratefully learn what is being offered, because the child or the parents cannot dictate their terms on the teacher. It's actually a grace being gifted to the child. 5 things were gifted free in Vedic culture: food, medicine, education, justice, astrological advice. Think of it. These are 5 biggest money making industries of modern time: food, medicine, justice, education, and astrological advice. What a paradigm, where we have come from, which culture to which culture. And this was our land called India, where these things were free. Anybody could have them amply without having to pay for them. So, the first understanding we should cultivate as teachers is that education is my service that I give to society. Other things are secondary, the prestige, the money making, the whatever. But primary purpose is that I am dedicated for giving 4 things to my students: character, competence, capacity, and consent. 4 C's. By my behavior, by my teaching, instruction, and especially by my way of organizing things, culture building, I am actually giving my students character, competence, capacity to do something wonderful, and consent. Consent means willingness or inspiration to do some meaningful work for the society. They should be passionate about doing something good. That's called consent. Sometimes we may give character, competence, capacity, but if you don't ignite the fire, as we call it, then they remain dull despite getting so many wonderful things in their life. So all this has to be given by the teacher. It's not just matter of teaching physics. It's not just matter of teaching maths. If we have that understanding कि आज का मेरा lesson खत्म, which means we basically draw our content from somewhere and we go and dump it somewhere else, like a bulldozer, earth moving machinery. So you lift from here and go, and there is something called as content dump, which means the teacher comes in the classroom and he has a deluge of words that he downloads upon the students, and they are all kind of flat under it, and they don't know what to do with this whole thing. That is not the meaning of teaching. Often teaching is a monologue. This dialogue and this monologue. Teaching often in schools is a monologue done by an adult standing at the helm of the classroom to a passive group of people, which often does not lead to any kind of action. Even after the education is complete, there is no change that occurs. So we don't want to have that as our definition for our teaching. So we would like to discuss, at least I need one print, because that's something to start with. So that was one paradigm. In Vedic education, it's free. Second is Vedic education was not based on Pratyaksha and Anuman. It was based on Shabda. Pratyaksha means through direct sense perception. All the senses, all the knowledge that my senses give me is correct, and anything that goes beyond my senses doesn't exist. This is a very, very narrow-minded attitude, because our senses have limitations. Ears can hear 20 Hz to 20 kHz. Eyes can only see 0.3 to 0.7 angstrom units. So what is our range of seeing or perceiving anything? So Pratyaksha is not the best way of getting knowledge. Then there is Anuman. Anuman means guesswork. In modern times we call it as hypothesizing or theorizing about something. Maybe like this, maybe like that. That is also not the best way to learn about anything. The best way to learn about anything is that one page? Okay, fine. So Vedic education was not based on Pratyaksha and Anuman, it was based on Shabda. Shabda means hearing from a bona fide authority who has realized the truth. For example, if you have to learn tabla, can you do experimentation and learn tabla? I'll figure it out all by myself. Can that work? Can theorizing work? Maybe it works like this, works like that. No. You need a teacher who has mastered the art, who is realized in that subject, and he teaches you. That is called Shabda. You listen from an authority and learn, rather than speculating and figuring out oneself. The third major difference in Vedic education and modern education is that Vedic education was character based. More than what you want to learn, why you want to learn is important. Imagine somebody giving technology or nuclear weapons or computer knowledge to some terrorist. Because knowledge, you want knowledge, that's wonderful, but why you want that knowledge? What's your character? What is the use that you are going to make out of that knowledge? That was also tested. Often our aptitude tests don't have character tests when we admit people in the school, especially in modern education. We just see their skill. If they have a skill, we take it. So character is very, very, very important. Vedic education, teacher carries a certain mood. I am servant of all, and we are all parts and parcels of God, meant for His enjoyment. Modern paradigm is that I am not dasa dasa anudas, I am boss anu boss. I am the master of everybody, and everyone is meant for my enjoyment. Like that everybody thinks. And in this way, this paradigm cannot build proper character. In order to get knowledge of the Vedas, there was a prerequisite of respect, faith, and especially devotion towards teachers and the scriptures, texts, and towards other saints. In modern education, every boy or a girl thinks that they are independent and they can do anything they like without having to show any respect towards their teacher. Especially all of us have some or other experience where somebody has become a headache for the teacher in the classroom. Why? Because there is disrespect is sign of intimacy in modern times, and often it creates big troubles when it comes to education. So anyways, these were some basic fundamentals of teaching we should be aware of before we even get into teaching as a service, so that we can do that service better. So this first part talked about values that we should have as teachers. What are they? We should be always aware of our example that we are setting. We should be always aware of controlling our urges so that we can have command over others and don't have to demand respect from them. And thirdly, we should have this Vedic paradigm, how Vedic education works, known to us, so that our attitude is very nobler towards teaching as our service. It is not a profession, it's a service. Now let's go and learn some skills of teaching. The last 4 lines on the first page summarize everything about what you need to know about teaching as a service, as a skill. There are 2 types of skills needed: design and preparation, or execution and delivery. That's second type. So in design and preparation, we have 4 things. First, have aims and objectives for your education. Learn about 7 types of intelligences. Of course, in modern times there are 8th intelligence introduced, called environmental intelligence. Then learning experiences that exist to teach something. Then lesson plan. How to do a lesson plan before you go into the classroom. So these are 4 major design or preparation related topics. Now let us talk about execution and delivery. When we are in the classroom, what are we supposed to do? Facilitation skills. Facil means to make easy. Facilitation means to make learning easy. Speaking skills. How to speak to children. Resource and room management. Very important. And finally, 6 effective management principles in the classroom. So we'll learn all of this today in our seminar that we have. So let's go to page 2. Education must be aims driven. That's still the first page. This is not second page. This is first page. You have to just give it to those who have not got it yet. So, let's talk about what is aims driven education. Typically, when we have to give some, say, class, what we do, we go and look into the textbook. Then we figure out some interesting teaching materials, some video, some PPT, some interesting story somewhere and whatever. We basically go running for content that we want to present. This is called as content driven education. Aims driven education means, it says there, what do you or your class want to achieve, taking into account the learning needs of the students. Objectives. What will students be able to do at the end of your lesson or course, which will demonstrate that you are meeting your aims. For example, if you have taught about global warming, then the third thing, assessment, is that at the end of the last 5 minutes of the class, you ask one or two of them to explain in their own words what is global warming. And that is how you know whether you accomplished your aim or not. Say it was a period of drawing, sketching. Then you give them an assignment where you actually tell them to draw some pentagon, hexagon of certain dimension. And if they can do it without your assistance, then you can be assured that I have taught them. They have learned how to draw. So there should be aims, objectives and assessments, all within one class that we conduct, to make sure that our education is complete. Often we go for content, and when we go in the classroom, what we do is called content dump. We just dump our content and come out. We don't know whether they have learnt it or not. So there has to be assessment at the end of the class. It could be 2 minutes assessment, 5 minutes assessment, but there has to be some assessment. Now, the 7 intelligences and selecting appropriate learning experiences. So I hope you know this 7 types of intelligences. This is a learning theory. Every one of you do in your B.Ed, D.Ed or M.Ed learning. SLIMBIL, S-L-I-M-B-I-L. 7 types of intelligences. Spatial, visual, linguistic, interpersonal, musical, bodily kinesthetic, intrapersonal and logical mathematical. You can add one last E to it, environmental intelligence. That's the 8th one. So we have children in our, or students in our classroom. They have different types of intelligences. Some of them are good at linguistic, some of them are good at musical, some of them are poor at logical mathematical. So we should know our class individually and also as a whole. What are their strengths and what are their weaknesses? Accordingly, we have to go and give our lessons in which the experiences are arranged in such a way that their intelligence matches with the learning experience. To give an example, if you teach A, B, C, D, becomes boring. But most often we put it in the form of a song. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O. Immediately you pick up. The same thing being taught. Why? Because it is put, the learning experience is made suitable to the intelligence that the child has, the musical intelligence. Is this clear? Like that, you have to find out for every lesson that you are giving, depending on the audience that you have, which learning experiences should I use to make them quickly learn what I am teaching them. So that is called as matching the 7 intelligences and the learning experiences. Is that okay? Huh? Yeah, environmental or naturalistic is same. The 8th intelligence is same. Naturalistic or environmental. So often what happens, our modern education is only designed for logical mathematical people. Most of the things that we teach in the classroom, people need to have some logical mathematical abilities, otherwise they can't hold it. But often if a child doesn't have that ability, he struggles like anything in the education. Because he can't cram, mug up, make logical links and quickly present it back. So they suffer. So this is a broad view of how education works. We have to match the intelligences with the learning experiences. And there could be a variety of them that we give. Now, lesson planning is the next item. How do you do your, what is a lesson plan? Lesson plan is nothing but your outline of what you are going to do, how you are going to do, for how long you are going to do, and what is going to be the contribution or participation by either you or the students during that exercise. So there is a plan being made for it. So this is how the lesson plan looks like. What was the topic? What were the aims? What are the learning objectives of that lesson? So you are giving a 35-minute class and you prepare this. And the class, the day, the date, time, tutor, whatever. How many minutes is that exercise going to go? What is the activity that is being performed? And who are participating in it? So let's say first 5 minutes, what? Introduce the topic. Who? Only the class teacher. Organization of the group. Well, they listen together. And resources needed, maybe a PPT, LCD projector. And assessment method. What was my introduction today for the class? Quiz. The quiz. And what did that quiz do? It did an assessment whether you like this topic or not, art of teaching. So if you give a big laughter and smile after that, I understand that this is relevant for you, this topic. So that's an assessment. It's not an assessment has to be some paper. Appreciation for whatever is being spoken. It matters. Be either a good teacher or a bad teacher. You will be remembered throughout your life for it by so many people that come across. So like that, that was introduction. On and on the whole thing goes, and this is how the lesson plan looks like. So if the lesson plan is once well designed, the next interesting thing is we should preserve it. Often our time goes in doing the same preparation again and again because we do not preserve what we prepare. In fact, if we preserve our lesson plans, then in due course of time, we can go on enhancing them, making them better and better, because groundwork is already done. So this is the advantage of having a lesson plan. Now, going ahead, how do you design a lesson plan? That's also given there. Number 1, focus. Focus means first identify your aims of the class. For example, I began the class by telling you today I am going to speak here about knowledge, skills and values that a teacher should have. essential knowledge, skills and values as a teacher. That is what we are going to learn today in our class. That's what we call it as art of teaching. And then the first part was dedicated towards values. This part is dedicated towards skills that you should have as a teacher. Last part will be dedicated for some crucial knowledge that a teacher should carry. And then I will be doing an assessment of all of you in the class itself. So in this way, what is my aim? To make all the teachers familiar with essential knowledge, skills and values of teaching as a service. That is my aim. What are my objectives? I am going to talk about values, skills and knowledge, and the teacher should be able to at least verbally, in their own words, tell me back what did they understand as values, skills and knowledge. That's my assessment. So objectives are also very clear, and in this way lesson planning goes further. Organize strategically. Organize strategically means that first of all there is coherence between what you are presenting. Sometimes what happens, we have so many things to say and we have jotted down them point wise, and in our organization we are not logically well connected. So people cannot flow very smoothly with us in the presentation. Why? Because we are not strategically planned about that lesson plan. Third is chop your lesson plan into discrete digestible sections. Imagine eating a watermelon. Can you eat a watermelon just like that? No, you chop it. And when you get that small thing, that also you make into a mouthful size of pieces, right? Then you deliver them. Like that, your lesson has a big watermelon that you want to make them digest. But right now what I can help you eat is a biteable piece. So I am right now talking only one biteable piece, that is lesson planning. And in that I am teaching how this is to be accomplished. And this is how I am delivering it. Over a period of time you will realize that you have eaten the whole watermelon. By the time the class ended, the big lesson has been accomplished. Now next is you visualize. Visualize means often there are interconnections between the sections that we are speaking and we are not very clear with them. So to the audience it appears very discrete. Now my first point is this, now my second point is that, now my third point is this. Instead, if you have visualized your teaching properly, then the whole class flows smoothly, seamlessly, as if you don't realize when did the teacher shift from the discussion on values to the discussion on skills to the discussion of knowledge. Although he has done it in his mind. So that is called you visualize how the class will flow and what will be the response most probably when I speak those topics. And lastly, stay focused. There are two terrible distractions we have while teaching. One is our own mind. We suddenly get this ideas, maybe I should tell this also, maybe I should speak that also. And we have so many things to sometimes say that it becomes a hindrance in staying focused. You have that experience sometimes? We get sidetracked and go in some direction and then we ask also, "Main kya bol raha tha?" Some people ask that question. I was teaching something. What was that? And then a student has to remind, कि आप वो कुछ तो ऐसा बोल रहे थे. Oh, then you come back again to the topic. So that is a poor, focus in the class. Another is the distraction caused by the students, the interruptions that they give. Somebody starts suddenly choral outbreaks, or some weird question somebody asks in between the class, not related to the topic, and we get carried away. So there is internal and external distractions that don't allow us to stay focused. So if you are well prepared with your lesson plan, no matter who does what tandav in front of you, you stay focused. You know what you are going there for and you do it nicely and you come out. That is the meaning of stay focused. So this is how lesson planning helps you to become a better teacher. Now next is facilitation skills. So till now was your design part. This is hard work. You have to do this at home or maybe in your teacher room. Here now you are not in the performance zone, you are not yet teaching. This is all hard work you are doing in the background, even before you come in the classroom. What are the 4 things you are doing? Aims and objectives, 7 types of intelligences and suitable learning experiences, and lesson planning. It's hard work. It is not, in Marathi they say, hey yera gabalache kam nave, which means this is not any Tom, Dick and Harry's job. This requires some sincerity and hard work to do that. Many of us would rather skip this. Just go into the class and start taking the textbook and teach. Because that's easy to do. Not much price to pay. Now, we will talk about execution or delivery skills. When you are actually in the classroom, what all things you should take care of. So the first skill is called facilitation skill. Facilitation skill begins with the ability to create a trusting environment. Now, mind you, these skills look very simple to talk about, but it can take a lifetime to develop. Very difficult. But there is a shortcut. You would like to know the shortcut? The shortcut to develop these skills is that you should develop self-control. And in order to develop self-control, the shortest cut you can take is to practice spiritual culture daily. Meditation, prayer, submission to God and His words, studying scriptures regularly, cultivating thoughtfulness in all our actions based on the scriptural knowledge. These are the means by which, and of course associating with saintly people, learning from them and chanting God's holy names. So these are some simple basic fundamentals of practicing spiritual culture. They are called as ABCD: association, books, chanting and diet. ABCD of spiritual life: association, books, chanting, diet. You become what you associate with. So if you associate with self-controlled people, you become self-controlled. If you associate with unregulated, unruly people who have no control over their mind and senses, you also develop no control over your mind and senses. So association. B is for books. I think instead of she distributing, can you just go distribute around so that nobody gets distracted? Yeah, I'm fine. B is for books. You don't have to write this down. This is on page 4, already given. Cultivate mode of goodness as a teacher. So I said skills are important, but they cannot be easily developed. What we need to do to have mental sharpness and self-control is that we should practice spiritual culture. If we simply live a materialistic culture, our mind and senses become blunt. उनके अंदर कुछ तीक्ष्णता नहीं रहती है. They are very loose, lousy. But if we practice spiritual culture, we become focused and our mind and senses become very sharp. And all this vacho vegam, manasa krodha vegam, jivha udara upastha vegam, one can control impulsivity very powerfully because of that spiritual culture that we practice. So anyways, C for chanting God's holy names, and D for diet, keep your diet vegetarian. And if possible, offer your food to God before you eat it. So this is called sanctifying our food, because food makes a direct impact on your consciousness. You are what you eat. We say that. So therefore, these 4 items, if you just look into and make them proper in your life, automatically you will develop a lot of self-control simply by looking into these 4 aspects of your life. Now let's go ahead. We were talking about facilitation skills. These skills can take a lifetime to develop. Don't get discouraged. Non-judgmental behavior. Sometimes we see a student misbehaving in the classroom, and we typically make judgment, right? For example, you are a pain in the neck. Why did you do that? Every time you have to shout and howl for everything in the classroom. So that's called judgmental behavior. What is non-judgmental behavior? We go catch the student, take him aside and ask, what is the need that you have that is not being fulfilled, for which you are shouting? And he says, well, usne mere ko mara hai, whatever. 100 things that may be there. Address that need. You will see his behavior will become normal after that. So in this way, non-judgmental behavior means learning to address needs and values of others without they even speaking to us what they are. That is non-judgmental behavior. Second is personal security and lack of defensiveness. Sometimes teachers, they instead of commanding respect are in the zone of demanding respect. Very typical. In our earlier school days, there was one teacher, he was known for beating the children. And he would start beating them the moment he would get out of his home, till he would reach to the school. En route, it is a village, right? Everybody goes to the same route to the school. So on the way, everybody will get to know master is coming. Right? 2-3 people he will give just like that. And while he enters in the school, in the classroom, and he was such a terror, everybody would be afraid of him. So that is not the way you command respect. So often, this tendency to demand respect is a great cause of disturbance in our service as a teacher. So what should we do? We should practice spiritual culture that gives us self-confidence and self-esteem. We don't need any validation from anybody of what we are doing. It's not that if you give me respect, then I stand good, and if you don't give me respect, then I'm all bad. It's not like that. I have some self-esteem that I have gained because of confidence I have in my spiritual culture that I practice. Third is willingness to listen. Teachers get so accustomed to speaking. Teachers get so accustomed to speaking that they forget to listen quite often. How many ears and how many mouths we have? 2 ears, 1 mouth. So proportionately we are supposed to listen and speak. Right? So listen. Willingness to value others' opinions, even if they are shocking or disturbing to us. That is called, if the teacher has these traits, they can build trusting environment in the heart of their students. And then education becomes so much easy. If your students trust you as a good teacher, education becomes a cakewalk for you. But if the students don't trust you as a good teacher, they can make you have it. They will make it so miserable for you to teach. Second, basic communication skills. Now, speaking and listening are basic communication skills. Reading and writing is another. So we should cultivate them properly. Certain things are beyond the scope of my class, because if I get into them, the class will become too elongated. But you can cultivate these skills on your own, having got the glimpse or the clue. Third is ability to maintain inconspicuous control. Teacher is always in charge of the class, but he doesn't make them feel so. Everybody feels that they are participative and happy being in contributing to the class. Third, the provision of appropriate resources. So at the bottom on page 3 we have resource management. What are the 4 resources that we have in the classroom? And objects. There are 4 types of resources we can use in the classroom. Now we have to make the most of those resources. How? Prepare properly, present properly, make them participate properly on what you have been presenting, and finally make them have the right perception about what you are teaching them. We tell this typical Alcoholics Anonymous joke. Once when Alcoholics Anonymous was conducted, and the speaker was giving a presentation on how dangerous it is to drink alcohol. So he took a liquor in a glass and he took a worm from somewhere, live worm, and he put it inside the glass. Right in front of the audience's eyes, that worm disintegrated into particles. It was like a shock. So he looked at the audience and asked them, thank you. So, what did you learn? And the fellow said, we should daily drink alcohol because it kills the germs in the stomach. So what is the problem? Problem of perception. Preparation is wonderful, presentation is nice, and participation was okay, but what went wrong is perception. So all four are needed. Sometimes we have wonderful resource, but people can't make anything out of it because we fail to give them the right perception. One time one teacher, lady teacher came in the classroom and she wrote on the board, I am beautiful. And then she looked, which tense is this? Past tense. The students replied. Anyway, so that's the meaning of children can make you have it. If you think they are not smart, they can make you have it in the classroom. Anyways, awareness of individual and group dynamics. Sometimes teacher is so oblivious, he's into the board or into some speaking thing, he's not even aware of what is happening around. Who is sleeping, who is awake, and who has quit learning long ago. They are not even aware. So that's the meaning of awareness. What is happening? Sometimes when the students are too new, you can't take too much control over them. So you have to allow them some autonomy. But if they are regular students that you interact with, there should be a one-on-one connection with each of them, that you can address if there is something wrong with them, why they are not participating in the class. That much relationship one should build with the children. Then there is time management skills and especially knowing our limitations as a teacher. Certain teachers are good at resources. Certain teachers are excellent at content. They know so much about their subject. Certain teachers are good at their style. The way they present is very amazing. Certain teachers are good at relationships. They can actually quickly build relationship with their students. So we have our strengths and we have certain limitations. For example, let's say there is a teacher who is excellent at content but not good at relationships. What should he do? He should use his strength to compensate for his weakness. He has a memory. So if he simply does this one thing, that he memorizes the names of all the students in the classroom, that's good enough. Because children then can feel related to him one-on-one. Every time he talks to somebody, calls by their name. Why? Because he has that ability to memorize. Now he compensates that in the other area. So that is the meaning of ability to know one's own limitations and deal with them appropriately. Now, guidelines on lecturing. I would give you 2 to 3 minutes. Just peacefully read that section. And if you didn't understand something, ask me. If you liked something or if you lack something, underline it. Do you need more time? Anyone? Okay. Any questions? Something is not clear? Yes?
The last one, the first one.
Avoid beginning with apologies unless absolutely necessary. If you make an apology, keep it concise and to the point. Sometimes we arrive late due to some traffic jam. Sometimes we are not prepared well for the class. Sometimes there is power failure or something doesn't work in your presentation. Technology generally always fails you. So even if you have to make an apology, we make it very brief, to the point, and just continue ahead with our presentation. Some people, either they get overpowered by the failure that has happened, whatever it is, because they are too perfectionist or they are too egoistic. They think that, how can that be? And they go on rambling their apology for a long time, or giving justifications. Don't do that. Keep it short. Sorry for starting late. There was some technical problem with our projector. Finished. Let's continue now. Any other?
Third point, crowd the audience together. Third point on the audience side.
Crowd the audience together. Sometimes it happens that students have a habit of sitting at the extreme ends of the classes, and we tend to think that that is okay, that is acceptable norm. It's not an acceptable norm. I'm your teacher. I have the right to call you and make you sit. Can you please sit here? Can you please sit here? I can actually tell you. So that's called crowd them together, so that we can appropriately address them. Any other? Just read out loud yourself. First column, last line. Avoid beginning with apologies. No. Okay. Don't use awkward sounding space fillers. Typical ones are, or like that, so, and so these are called space fillers. They don't mean anything. They are simply distraction. So if you are still thinking about the point which has not clicked to you, just pause. Give me a minute, I need to think. Come back, go back into your notes or whatever it is, and then start again. Sometimes we are so afraid to look into our notes because they may think that I have not prepared well or whatever. That we ramble, we make useless points that make no sense. We just go on speaking something just to fill the gap because silence is unbearable. शांत कैसा बैठने का क्लास में? Continuously बोलना चाहिए कुछ.
Or teachers think that we are the best or we know everything, and students also know that we know everything. Then they tend to project themselves in like that. No? So
Yes.
we feel that if we see in the notes or like that, or if we ask a single
So the pride is a problem, and inferiority is also another problem. So when you are too proud, you get problem, and your inferiority. So all this can be simply addressed if you practice spiritual culture. You become a self-confident, natural person, the way you are. You don't have to put up any show. It requires hard work to see and show glamour. Why do that hard work? I don't want to see glamour. Just don't waste my time. And I don't want to show off glamour. So that is how you avoid hard work. Chill, as they call it. Cool. Now, any other?